The first time I noticed the money was gone, I told myself it had to be a mistake. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, the early morning light spilling across the counter where I kept my phone. The coffee maker was hissing, that familiar sound that usually settled me, but that morning it felt too loud. I had opened my banking app without thinking, the way you check the time or the weather. Just a habit, just routine. And then I saw the number. It was smaller than it should have been, much smaller. I remember blinking once then again as if my eyes were the problem. I refreshed the screen. The number didn't change. My stomach tightened, slow and heavy like something sinking. At first I laughed under my breath. A soft, nervous sound. I told myself the app was glitching, or maybe a bill had gone through early, maybe I was just tired. I had no idea that this was the beginning, that this quiet moment in my kitchen, with the smell of cheap coffee and the hum of the refrigerator, was where my marriage really started to end. Back then my life looked simple from the outside, ordinary. I was proud of that. My husband Daniel and I had been married for 17 years. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with beige siding and a lawn I tried to keep alive no matter how hot the summers got. We didn't have children. That had been a heartbreak we learned to carry quietly, like a shared scar we never pointed out. Daniel worked in logistics for a regional company. I handled payroll at a small medical office. We weren't rich, but we were careful. We planned, we saved. Especially me. I had grown up watching my mother stretch every dollar until it screamed. She used to say, money doesn't change people, it shows you who they already are. I didn't understand that when I was young, I just knew I never wanted to feel helpless. So I saved, a little from every paycheck, bonuses, tax returns. I opened a separate savings account years ago, not to hide anything but to feel secure. Daniel knew about it. He joked once that I was preparing for the apocalypse. I laughed with him, even though part of me wasn't joking at all. That account was my safety net, my quiet comfort, my proof that no matter what happened, I could stand on my own feet. Or so I thought. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, had always been a complicated presence in our marriage. She wasn't cruel, not outright. She was the kind of woman who smiled too tightly and asked questions that felt like inspections. Her house was always spotless, her hair perfectly sprayed, her voice gentle but edged. She lived alone after Daniel's father passed. She'd call often, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to sigh heavily into the phone. About 8 months before I noticed the money missing, Daniel started mentioning her more. Small comments at first. She sounded tired today. She's worried about her bills. She doesn't want to be a burden. He'd say these things while rinsing dishes or folding laundry, casual like background noise. I listened, I nodded, I felt sympathy. Losing a spouse does things to people, I knew that. One night after dinner he sat across from me at the table, his hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. I noticed his jaw was tight. My mom needs some help, he said. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. What kind of help? I asked. He hesitated. That should have been my first real warning. Daniel wasn't a man who hesitated much. She's fallen behind, he said finally. Medical stuff, the house. She doesn't want to ask, but I can tell she's struggling. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Of course we can help, I said, and I meant it. Family helps family, that's what I believed then. He squeezed my fingers, relief washing over his face so quickly it surprised me. I knew you, understand. Over the next few weeks he brought it up more, not dramatically, just enough. How her prescriptions had gone up, how the property taxes shocked her, how embarrassed she felt. I offered to sit down together, go over her finances, maybe find ways to reduce costs. Daniel shook his head. She'd hate that, he said. She's proud. So instead he suggested we help quietly, little by little. At first it was him sending money from our joint account, nothing alarming. Then one evening, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, he mentioned something else. I was thinking, he said, foam clinging to the corner of his mouth. Your savings account, it's just sitting there. Maybe we could use some of that, temporarily, for my mom. I paused, toothbrush midair. How much? I asked. Not a lot, he said quickly, too quickly. Just until she gets back on her feet, I'll make sure it's replaced. I remember staring at our reflection in the mirror. 17 years of shared mornings, shared losses, shared promises. I trusted him, why wouldn't I? Okay, I said. He smiled, relief again, gratitude. He kissed my cheek, minty and warm. That was the first transfer. After that it became easier. He tell me he needed a little more, I'd say yes. Sometimes he didn't even ask. He said it was easier if he just handled it. I let him. I wish I could say there was a single moment where my gut screamed at me, but there was. It was quieter than that. A series of small dismissals, a habit of trust. Until that morning in the kitchen, when the number on my screen refused to make sense. I scrolled transaction after transaction, transfers I didn't recognize, amounts that made my chest tighten. By the time Daniel walked in, tying his tie, humming softly, my coffee had gone cold. Hey, he said, you okay? You look pale. I looked up at the man I thought I knew, my phone heavy in my hand. We need to talk, I said. He frowned just slightly. About what? I swallowed. My savings. Something flickered across his face, gone in a second, but I saw it. And in that moment, standing in our quiet kitchen, I realized the mistake I'd made wasn't trusting his mother. It was trusting him. Daniel didn't answer right away. He stood there with one hand still on his tie, the other resting against the counter, like he needed something solid to lean on. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence between us. Somewhere outside a car passed, tires hissing over pavement. What about it? He asked finally, his voice careful, too careful. I unlocked my phone and slid it across the counter toward him. This, I said, these transfers, I don't recognize most of them. He glanced down, just a glance. He didn't pick up the phone, he didn't scroll. His shoulders dropped a fraction, like a man letting go of a breath he'd been holding too long. It's for my mom, he said. All of it? I asked. Yes. The word came out quick, defensive, final. I folded my arms across my chest, more to keep myself steady than anything else. Daniel. This is almost everything I had saved. I told you she needed help. I know, I said, trying to keep my voice level, but this is more than help. This is draining me. He finally picked up the phone, scrolled slowly, as if seeing the numbers for the first time. Things added up, he said. Unexpected stuff. What kind of stuff? I asked. He shrugged. Life. That was when the unease settled in deeper. Life was vague. Life was what you said when you didn't want to explain. I thought we agreed you. Tell me before taking money, I said. I didn't think you'd want to be bothered every time, he replied. His tone shifted then, irritation creeping in. You said you trusted me. I do, I said automatically, then I stopped myself. I did. He looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm confused, I said, and scared, and I don't like not knowing where my money went. He sighed and rubbed his face. You're making this into something it's not. That sentence, I would hear it in my head many times later. I didn't push that morning. He had work. I had work. We kissed goodbye like we always did, though his lips felt distant, distracted. I told myself we'd talk later, calmly, like adults. But the day stretched long and restless. I messed up payroll numbers twice. My coffee went untouched. By lunchtime my head was pounding. When I got home that evening, Daniel wasn't there yet. The house felt too quiet. I opened my laptop at the dining table, the wood cool under my palms, and logged into my banking account on the bigger screen. I needed to see it clearly, needed to understand. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Some of the transfers didn't go to Evelyn's account. They went to an account I didn't recognize at all. My heart began to race, fast and shallow. I clicked on the account details, limited information, different bank, different branch. I stared at the screen, a tight buzzing filling my ears. When Daniel came home, I was still sitting there, unmoving. He stopped short when he saw me. What's wrong? You tell me, I said, turning the laptop toward him. He leaned in, his eyes scanned the screen. For a split second, panic flashed across his face. Real panic, not irritation, not defensiveness. Then it was gone. That's still for my mom, he said. I shook my head. Daniel, this isn't her account. He straightened. It doesn't matter whose name it's under. It matters to me, I said. My voice trembled now, no matter how hard I tried to steady it. Why would she need a second account? Why didn't you tell me? He walked past me into the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared inside like the answer might be waiting there. You're overthinking this. No, I said, standing up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I'm finally thinking. He turned, eyes sharp. Do you think I'd steal from you? The word hit me like a slap. I think you're hiding something, I said quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The distance between us felt wider than the room. She's embarrassed, he said finally. She didn't want everything in her name. She asked me to handle it. And you didn't think to tell me, I asked. He threw his hands up. I was trying to protect her, and you. From what? From stress, he snapped. I looked at him then, really looked. The man who used to tell me everything, who used to ask my opinion about which brand of cereal to buy. His jaw was clenched, his eyes darted away from mine. That night we slept back to back, a quiet wall between us. I listened to his breathing, steady and even, while my mind raced. I replayed every conversation, every transfer, every moment I'd brushed aside a question because love told me to. Over the next few weeks I watched him more closely, not like a detective, like a wife who no longer felt safe in her own certainty. He started staying out later, said work was busy, his phone buzzed often, he took calls in the garage. When I asked how his mother was doing, his answers were vague. She's better. She's hanging in there. One Saturday I offered to drive with him to see her. I even baked a pie, the kind she liked with too much cinnamon. He froze just for a second. She's not up for visitors today, he said. I nodded, smiled, put the pie in the freezer. That night while he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't touch it, I didn't need to. The name lit up the screen. Lena. I didn't know a Lena. My chest tightened, that sinking feeling returning, heavier now. When he came out, towel around his waist, I asked casually, who's Lena? He didn't miss a beat. Coworker. What kind of coworker texts at 10 at night? I asked. He shrugged. Project stuff. I nodded. I went to bed early. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the water drip from the showerhead, thinking about a savings account that was nearly empty and a marriage that suddenly felt just as hollow. I still didn't know the full truth. But I knew this much. Whatever my husband had been funding, it wasn't just his mother's bills. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, numbers floated behind my eyelids. Dates, transfers, amounts that no longer felt abstract. They felt like hours of my life I couldn't get back. Mornings I'd skipped lunch to save. Evenings I'd said no to small pleasures because I believed in being prepared. By Monday, I decided I needed answers I wasn't going to get from Daniel. I took a personal day from work and drove to Evelyn's house. Her place sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the same as always. White shutters, plastic flowers in the window boxes that never changed with the seasons. I parked at the curb and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart beating faster with each breath. She answered the door wearing a lavender sweater, her hair perfectly set. She looked fine, better than fine. Oh, she said, surprise flickering across her face. I didn't know you were coming. I was in the area, I lied gently. I thought I'd check on you. She stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something sweet, maybe vanilla. Everything was neat, orderly, no signs of struggle. We sat at her small kitchen table. She poured tea into matching cups, her hands steady. How are you holding up? I asked. She smiled, that tight little smile. Oh, you know, one day at a time. I watched her closely, the new handbag hanging on the back of her chair, the fresh manicure, the flat-screen TV I hadn't seen before in the living room. Daniel mentioned you've been having a hard time financially, I said carefully. Her brow furrowed. Did he? Yes, I said, that's why we've been helping. Her smile faltered. Helping. The word hung between us. We've been sending money, I continued, from my savings. Her eyes widened, genuine shock washing over her face. Oh no, I told him not to worry about me. I'm fine, I've been managing. My stomach dropped. How much did he send you? I asked. She shook her head slowly. Just a little, a few times, enough to help with prescriptions. I insisted he stop. I felt cold, even sitting in her warm kitchen. Do you have another account? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked confused. Another account, why would I? I nodded, forcing a smile, just trying to understand. She reached across the table and patted my hand. You've always been so thoughtful, she said. Daniel is lucky to have you. I drove home in silence, the radio off, my thoughts loud and sharp. Whatever Daniel had been doing, it wasn't for his mother. Not fully, not honestly. That night when he came home late again, I didn't ask where he'd been. I didn't need to. I told him I was tired. I kissed his cheek. I watched him walk down the hall and felt like I was watching a stranger. Over the next few days, I did something I never imagined I would. I started paying attention. I memorized his schedule. I noted when he left and when he returned. I watched how often he checked his phone, how quickly he turned it face down when I entered the room. One afternoon, while he was at work, I logged into our shared computer. I didn't go digging wildly. I went looking for what already felt obvious. There it was. A rental agreement. Not in our town, a small apartment across the city. Month to month, paid in full, 6 months in advance. My hands shook as I scrolled. Utility bills, furniture purchases, a gym membership, all paid from the account that had drained my savings. This wasn't an emergency. This was a life. When Daniel came home that evening, I was sitting on the couch, the lamp on, the rest of the room dim. The documents lay neatly on the coffee table. He stopped when he saw them, his shoulders sagged. How long? I asked. He didn't answer. How long have you been using my money to pay for your secret apartment? I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. He sank into the armchair across from me, rubbing his temples. It's not what you think. It never is, I said. He exhaled sharply. I needed space. From what? I asked. From me. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I saw guilt in his eyes. I felt stuck, he said. After everything, after not having kids, after years of the same routine, I just needed something different. So you lied, I said, and stole. I was going to pay it back, he said quickly, once things settled. And Lena? I asked. He flinched. She's someone I met. My throat tightened. Does she live there? He hesitated. That was answer enough. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. You told me your mother needed help, I said slowly. You used her to make me say yes. Tears welled in his eyes then. I didn't think it would go this far. But it did, I said, and you let it. We sat in silence, the truth finally laid bare between us. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet, calculated, repeated. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't just hurt. I was done being fooled. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything, I didn't even cry right away. That surprised him more than anger ever could. Daniel sat across from me, waiting for something explosive, something loud that might let him paint me as unreasonable. But all I felt was a deep, quiet clarity, like fog lifting after a long night. How much is left? I asked. He looked up confused. What? My savings, I said. How much did you leave me? He swallowed. A few thousand. I nodded once. I stood up, gathered the papers from the table and placed them back into a neat stack. My hands were steady. My heart felt bruised but calm, like it had finally stopped fighting reality. I want full access to every account, I said. Now. He opened his mouth to argue, closed it again. He stood and retrieved his laptop, his phone, his banking passwords scribbled on a notepad like confessions. We sat side by side on the couch, not touching, as I logged into everything. I saw it all. The transfers, the rent, the dinners, jewelry, weekend trips. A second life built carefully and comfortably on money I had saved for emergencies, for old age, for security. For us. By the time I finished, my chest felt hollow. I'm going to need you to leave, I said. His head snapped up. Tonight. Yes. Where am I supposed to go? He asked. I looked at him, truly looked. You have an apartment, I said, one I paid for. He didn't fight me then. He packed a bag in silence. I stood in the doorway and watched him move through our bedroom, touching familiar things like he might miss them. When he reached the door, he turned. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I believe you, I replied, but you did. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. The days that followed were strange. Quiet, heavy. I moved through the house slowly, noticing details I'd ignored for years. The scuff on the hallway wall, the loose hinge on the cabinet. The way the sun hit the living room floor in the afternoon. I met with a lawyer the following week, a calm woman with kind eyes who listened without interrupting. She didn't gasp, she didn't judge, she explained my options clearly. You can recover some of this, she said, especially since it was taken without your consent. I didn't feel victorious, I felt tired. When Daniel's mother found out, she called me in tears. I had no idea, she said, none at all. I know, I replied, and I meant it. In some ways she was another casualty of his choices. Word spread slowly at first. Friends, family, people who had once smiled at us across dinner tables. I didn't rush to explain myself, I let the truth do its quiet work. Daniel's reputation didn't collapse overnight, it eroded, questions replaced assumptions, his explanations sounded thin without me beside him. I heard through mutual friends that Lena moved out within weeks. The apartment felt smaller without stolen money cushioning it. Reality has a way of catching up. I focused on myself. I set up a new account in my name only. I rebuilt slowly, dollar by dollar, choice by choice. I learned the comfort of solitude, the peace of evenings without tension humming beneath the surface. Some nights grief came in waves. 17 years doesn't disappear quietly. I let myself feel it, I let myself rest. Months later, Daniel asked to meet. We sat in a coffee shop, neutral ground. He looked older, smaller. I'm sorry, he said again. I know, I replied. We talked about practical things, paperwork, closure. There was no fire left in me, only resolve. When I walked out, the air felt lighter. That was when I knew I would be okay. The house felt different once Daniel was truly gone. Not emptier, just quieter in a way that didn't demand anything from me. The silence no longer felt like something waiting to be filled, it felt earned. The divorce moved forward without drama. Maybe we were both too tired for war. The lawyer handled most of it. Documents arrived in thick envelopes. I signed where I was told, my name steady, my hand sure. Each signature felt like a small release. I did recover some of the money, not all of it. I learned to make peace with that. What mattered more was the control returning to my own hands. I opened new accounts, changed passwords, closed doors that no longer needed to stay open. Evelyn and I spoke once more after everything was finalized. She asked if we could have tea. I agreed. She looked smaller than before. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I raised him better than this, she said. I know, I replied gently, but he made his own choices. We sat in silence for a moment, two women connected by disappointment and loss. Before I left, she reached for my hand. Take care of yourself, she said. I am, I told her, and for the first time it felt true. I learned things about myself in that season I never would have chosen to learn any other way. I learned I could sit with discomfort without running from it. I learned trust doesn't mean surrender. I learned that love without honesty isn't love at all. Some evenings I still cooked for two out of habit. I'd laugh softly at myself and pack the extra portion for lunch the next day. Healing came in those small, ordinary moments. I started walking in the mornings again. Just me, the quiet streets, the rhythm of my own steps. The world felt bigger, full of possibility I'd forgotten how to see. A year later, my savings account wasn't impressive, but it was mine. Every dollar represented resilience, not sacrifice. I kept that in mind whenever I logged in. People sometimes ask if I'd ever trust again. I tell them yes, but differently. Trust now comes with boundaries, with awareness, with the understanding that my well-being is not something I owe away. If you're listening to this and something in my story feels familiar, I want you to know this. Pay attention to the quiet moments, the numbers that don't add up, the questions you're told not to ask. You're not wrong for wanting clarity. You're not selfish for protecting what you've worked for. And if you ever find yourself standing in your kitchen, staring at a screen that changes everything, know that you're stronger than you think. Would you have trusted the way I did, or would you have asked harder questions sooner? Tell me in the comments. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes after a truth finally settles. Not the quiet of loneliness, but the quiet of understanding. That's the place I found myself in after everything ended, when the questions stopped circling and the answers, even the painful ones, stood still. For a long time I asked myself how I missed it, how I trusted so easily, how I let love speak louder than reason, but over time I learned something important. Trusting someone who promised to protect you is not a weakness, it's human. The mistake wasn't believing in my marriage, the mistake was ignoring my own voice when it started to whisper. If you're listening to this and you're feeling that same whisper, that small tug of unease you keep pushing aside, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to look twice. You are allowed to protect what you worked hard to build, whether that's money, peace, or your sense of self. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes wrapped in concern, dressed up as sacrifice, and delivered by someone you thought would never hurt you. That doesn't make you foolish. It makes you honest in a world that often is. I didn't lose everything, I lost an illusion, and in its place I found myself again. So let me ask you, from one woman to another, from one lived story to your own, if the numbers didn't add up in your life, would you keep looking away, or would you choose yourself? If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts below. And if you want to hear more real stories like this, told with honesty and heart, don't forget to support the channel. Sometimes the stories we hear help us find the courage to face our own.